Hello, everybody. Welcome to Anime Sickos. It's the podcast for geniuses and the only podcast where we take a look at the four pillars of modern misery: anime, gaming, posting, and jobs. I am Tom, an anime sicko.
I'm Joe, an anime sicko. My son is too strong.
He's got powerful moves.
You know that stand in JoJo that can just swim through concrete? He's just doing that without powers.
That's really good.
It makes changing him very hard.
You sent a picture of him today where he's doing the Italiano gesture unmistakably.
He was dropping a book to do it. He was denying literacy to do the spicy meatball gesture.
Yeah. If you are in Chicago nowadays, you will notice military helicopters flying over your roof in insanely low altitudes. I assume that's going to just be forever. Folks, this is one of those Anime Sickos episodes where it's not just us two yapping. It's going to be a lot of that. Don't worry. We have a guest on today. You have heard of that? You have heard of us doing a guest episode? We do that from time to time. Our guest is Danette Chavez. Danette, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
If folks out in the class, if students out there don't don't recognize your name, how would you describe your own self?
So I started in alt weeklies. I'm a media person. I started in alt weeklies, and we all know how alt weeklies turned out.
Great. They made a lot of money.
They're thriving.
And now they're next to nowhere. And since about 2015, I've been in digital media. Again, a great time to join an industry, pivoting to video. But yeah, I should probably sum myself up as I'm an editor. I'm a culture writer and editor. And I worked at the AV Club from 2015 to 2022, when people not everyone knows this, but the senior staff were pushed out by the previous owners, and the AV Club became much less of a Midwestern thing. But earlier this year, back in April, Paste bought the AV Club. And since July of this year, I have been the new editor-in-chief.
That is the coolest shit that I've ever heard, folks.
Because usually the story is there's a cool website and then it dies forever. So this is the opposite.
Yeah.
This is so fun. And also, I did so much time theft in my 20s on the AV Club.
Like, I've been... since we've been preparing for this episode, I'm like, I go to the address bar. I never go to the address bar anymore. I just press the Twitter button. I type in AV, and I'm like, that's like, these muscles are so atrophied. And I go to the AV Club page, and I'm like, there's an article by Sean O'Neill. Like, huh? What? Oh my God. It's incredible. I'm so pleased. And I reached out to you about this episode, Danette, because I knew you in the sense that I used to know like a lot of artsy people in Chicago because of my old live show, The Skewer, which died an ignominious death, or rather was put to an ignominious hibernation, I hope, by that big virus that made a lot of dead guys exist. But you did The Skewer, and I was just like, Danette is a person to know. And I saw that, you worked in media, and I'm like, I hope Danette makes it, because everyone else I know who works in media is constantly announcing their layoff. I saw, again, in 2022, there was that big AV Club thing where Geo Media was like, everyone has to move to LA today. We're not paying for you to move, and we're not increasing your salary when you live in LA where everything costs more. And then that, and I was like, that just goes to show evil always wins. And then fucking like, you're like, hey, I'm editor-in-chief of the AV Club. My mind was completely blown. I couldn't believe it. Congratulations again. It's so cool.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to hear that, because I do think, one, that you're going straight to the homepage. I think, it's one of those things where it sounds like such an outdated concept, right? That, that you would go to a website instead of having it presented to you in some format, either through social media or I guess TikTok is social media too, but like,
Yeah.
like somebody summarizing an article in a video, and then,
Oh.
you have to look up the article. Don't do that. Go to the homepage. But it's also, I think you touched on this a bit, but like the reason people stop going to homepages is because so few sites have really tried to present like a real entry point for people. The last few years, I mean, this is something that's happened on and off, but like so many sites have just tried to kind of anonymize themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they wanted you to like feel like you were on Entertainment Weekly, even though you were actually on AV Club. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and that, that drives away readers, right? When something doesn't have an identity. But yeah, we've just seen over the last few years, sites just trying to mimic each other, right?
Yeah.
And, the thing is, if they're all the same, what's going to make you go to any one?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think what we're going to start seeing, and I might be getting ahead of the conversation here, but I think we're going to start seeing sites sharpen their focus again. You know what I mean? It's not going to be, this
Yes.
broad entertainment thing. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Like a site like ours, we're not big on like celebrity gossip. Like historically, we weren't. And it's because there are other sites that do that and do that well. And they should get to do that. Whereas, the AV Club was started with this belief of like, there's always something to say about pop culture, whether you're doing it today or 2 weeks from now.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was the Midwestern sensibility of it, right? Like you weren't on a red carpet, there's no need to just promote, a movie or a show through your site. It's, you're showing it a lot more respect by actually taking time to evaluate it, whether or not it's good.
Yeah.
I think people need to say this when they're talking about like their Midwest cultural heritage. The Onion is part of it, and they try to make everyone go to L.A. They said, "Do not be in the Midwest."
Insane.
Yeah.
Okay. I love what you're saying here. Just the sharpening of focus, because like again, what was it that made AV Club beloved in its heyday? What made it have a heyday to begin with? It's like because one, like as a reader, you got to sort of know the writers, what they were into, what they tended to write about, and like there would be like a weird list, and it's like top like songs that involve some crazy I wish I could have thought of a better. This is why I'm not the editor of the AV Club, because I can't think of a list. But there'd be like a weird list, and like everyone would contribute some shit I'd never heard of. Again, going to an entertainment site and hearing about something you've never heard of is like unthinkable, because like for the last decade, the thing for an entertainment site to do if they wanted to make money was again publish an anonymized article called like "Who was Blungus at the end of the latest Marvel movie? Blungus explained." And like that's so I don't care about Blungus. I just don't. I'm so pleased that it's coming back. I mean, like a huge reason why I became an annoying snob, like was the AV Club and it's weird shit, and like I love that it's back. Your random rolls is back. I love it.
It's we're bringing back writers, some ringers, also, some ongoing series. But the goal is also to use those same principles, right? And
Hmm.
and come up with new series too, right?
Yes.
Because you just mentioned the whole Marvel thing, and that's a really good point in terms of like right now so few sites are trying to be ahead of the conversation. They're not trying to be tastemakers.
Hmm. Hmm.
Everyone is waiting until something is already at critical mass before weighing in, because then it's not worth your time, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like, oh, no one has, the long Oz Perkins, the his Long Legs, the
Yeah.
Nick Cage horror movie. I can't recall what the box office was opening weekend for it, but it's now past the 100 million mark.
Hmm.
And I just know there's some editors who are going, did we know about this? Did we know long legs was going to be a thing? And it's like, well, this is why you try to look ahead, and this is why you hire actual writers and editors instead of just like a bunch of audience development people to then, instruct what few writers and editors a site has to tell them what's already popular so that they can write about that.
Yeah. So this is something I assume that sort of the former way of only going for the proven critical mass stuff. I have to assume that is from the sort of philosophy of like we like all online publications must scale forever. We must make more money every quarter forever, and that means more. More who was Blungus explained articles. Put who's Blungus on the top page, which is awful. No one wants to read that other than people who are looking, who watched the Marvel movie and it's like, who is that guy Blungus in the end credits? And then they look it up and like, oh, that's who, and then they never go to the site again. Is there sort of a growing faction of people in charge who are becoming like happy with or will tolerate a site that does not scale forever? Because like the Onion, if I understand the news correctly, has been purchased by like a company of, or rather like a holding company that is just like fans of the Onion who don't want the Onion to scale forever. They just want like keep being the Onion because we like that the Onion's around. Like, are they like crazy anomalies or like, because I would hope that, given that people like good writing and it seems impossible for that to scale forever, like someone is just going to be like, well, whatever, I'll lower my ambitions for the good of humanity. Like, is that happening?
I don't know that it's happening very broadly at the moment, right? But I think you encapsulate it well in terms of like it starts with ownership. It starts with these companies, like, these investors, whatever you want to call them. It starts with them having realistic expectations, right? But it's like, I will bring up a much older example. When I was at the Reader, it was sold for something like $30 million in the early 2000s. And that's an insane amount of money to, for even, with during our classifieds heyday, that was an insane amount of money. And the thing is, the company, it was a company called Creative Loafing that was based in the South. And so they had a bunch of different alt weeklies, right? And so they thought it was going to be this big media network, but then, like there were certain expectations of the readers, sale numbers and circulation numbers to offset that $30 million loan, right? So that the Reader was never going to be able to stay the Reader with that kind of, like debt waiting to be paid, right?
Yeah.
And that's what keeps happening with these media companies, like somebody like Great Hill, like you get some investors, and these are the people that fund GO, but you get investors that somebody tells them, like we can get this for a song, and then the immediate thought is, okay, then we need to make this kind of profit forever, right? Like, and you can't just have some profit every year. It has to increase every year. And the problem with that, right, isn't just that like perpetual growth isn't a thing, but it's that it's not a goal it's not an objective that I think should be applied to any kind of journalism, whether it's, like New York Times style, like investigative reporting, although they're kind of dropping the ball there.
Yeah.
Or if, it's culture writing, right? Like, the reason people are so excited about The Onion is because they know what to expect from it, right? Like, they really, those people are great, and they really stuck to their guns through a really dreary chapter in their history. And, you also have to realize that, like, because The Onion is satire, you're probably not going to get there aren't any big toy companies anymore, so I can't say a toy company.
Hmm.
But do you know what I mean? Like you're not going to get certain advertisers willing to do
Yeah.
that, you know. So, you know, you have to you have to understand what it is you actually own, right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
if you own a satirical website, you're not going to, you know, get the same kind of ad buys you would if you were, you know, if you just had like a really broad lifestyle blog.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you know, it starts with responsible ownership, I think, you know, like
Yeah.
realizing that we shouldn't be trying to get blood from a stone in journalism, because then, you know, again, then that leads to everybody making the same SEO plays. It leads to everybody making
Hmm.
the same stories. And in the end, it leads, and we've seen this, right? In the end, it leads to fewer sites. So like,
Yeah.
what are you guys even doing? Like,
I mean, is this a good way to look at it? I'm think as you're saying this, the image that's popping in my head is the idea of like a park or like the post office or like the library. No one is just like, why isn't the library turning a profit? It's like these are public services that everyone wants and everyone knows that just life is better when these things are around. Like you do like, you know, there's no local journalism anymore because it doesn't make money. And thus, like, if you are the mayor of that one suburb who just like did pure, like, who just stole, like, all she did was steal, like, you can just do that. And like, what are the chances anyone's going to catch you? And, but like,
The thing I'm curious about, you said responsible ownership, which would be cool. My understanding, and I don't know if this is 100% true, but like these debt bombs that all these companies were carrying was because it was like venture capital moves, right? Constantly moving to the next thing. Is that a fair assessment, or?
Um, I watch the show industry. I won't pretend that I super understand how, you know, moving around millions and if not billions of dollars really works. But I mean, I think the overarching principle, right? That like when you take somebody else's money to buy something, the person that you in a sense borrowed money from is eventually going to want it paid back. And the thing
mhm,
is, you are going to want something for your time, right?
mhm.
And that's, you
Yeah.
know, that's basically what keeps happening is that, I mean, look at what happened with Vice, right? Look at what happened with BuzzFeed. There's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what journalism should do. And I can't speak to what, you know, what's going to happen in the future, but like I wish that more people would accept that sustainability, I think, is the real goal. Like when you know, like let's, you know,
Mhm.
to kind of change the tenor of the conversation a bit, I get really excited seeing sites like Hellgate, that New York-based like local news site. Obviously Defector, sites like Aftermath. These are, you know, like Defector was founded by a bunch of the former Deadspin people, the people
Mhm.
that were first pushed out, right? The whole
Yeah.
Salute to Sports nonsense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, Aftermath is a bunch of former Kotaku people. So you're kind of probably noticing a trend in terms of like
Yeah.
former
Yes.
GO sites.
Yes.
But you know, these are worker owned sites. And you know, like they run on subscriptions. And I mean that whole model requires familiarity, right? It
Yeah.
requires people to know exactly what they're going to get in
Mhm.
terms of
Mhm.
the quality, right?
Mhm.
And that kind of thing is so exciting to me. And that's also just like, I think, you know, just I say this just as someone who has had to weather a few of these, like, you know, industry crumbling chapters, but sustainability just seems to be where to go. Like everybody gets paid.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like it's that is just as an individual, that is, you know, where I would like to see a lot of sites end up.
Yes. I agree. I mean, this is sort of what we, you know, have moaned about in the past, just as sort of outsiders who see, you know, posts about people being like, I lost my job, got laid off again. It's just like and you know, when we would see someone who we follow or know in real life be like, I got it, like, oh, I just got a job as a staff writer. I'm like, I know the tone of your post is positive because you got a job, but I, as like someone who's reading it from the outside, like, all I see is hey, Tom, in 6 months, you're going to see a post from this person saying, got laid off again, anyone hiring? And like, because again, it just feels like it felt like for a long time, sustainability was simply not
It wasn't
possible.
even like that sustainability wasn't possible. It was like weird cannibalization and implosion was the goal. It really felt like
Yes.
that. Like it really did seem like the goal is so when it fucks up, there's a big boom.
Yeah. It's like these people spend all their millions to buy a site like so that they can like see it die. It's like, you know, it's like a fucking the guy from Mr. Robot who would go and pay homeless people to let him beat him up so he could feel something crack underneath his fist. It's like that, but for a place where a bunch of people work.
Yeah. And the hope is that we see more of this, right? Like
Hmm.
people controlling the means, right? I'm just excited about sites like that because we you do you remember the push for Substacks over the last few years? And
Hmm.
I like the
Yes.
number of people would say like just start a Substack. Like, I would pay $5 a month. And it's like, well, you still need however many people. Like that
Hmm.
still, in a sense, needs to scale, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Like,
The Substack push felt especially bad to me because it just felt like we were walling off more and more of the internet. Like we're now putting this what would have been like website or blog content uh 10 years ago now is like a newsletter email, and like unless you are subscribed to this person you'll never see it.
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's a good way
But,
of putting it.
mhm.
And then ironically, despite that, you could still make huge dollars doing this. Like you can be a Substack writer writing like insanity, but if you have your audience, you're like have your walled off revenue box.
Yeah. But as you know, Danette was saying, like, if you're just like a if you don't have your hook of like, I'm going to be really racist, you're going to hear the weirdest slurs out of me. You don't have that sort of like gimmick. It's like, I mean, it's like Patreon. It's like, oh, did you know that fucking the Chapo boys make a lot of money? They make their living off of this, and it's like, well, that's nice for them, but like most people are going to be like us and make a couple $100 if that, and like again, like it's nice. I'm not going to say I'm unhappy when the Patreon money comes in, but like this is not something. This is not anything but like a funny hobby, which is fine for me because this is our funny hobby. But like, if you are a culture writer and the fucking advice is start a Substack, it's like, well, yeah, good luck.
Can I ask a question here? I feel like obviously like the forever money incentive is impeding culture writing and new sites, but I really feel like just like the feed, like the idea of the feed in apps is just like incompatible with a really vibrant like sort of rich web of I'm just thinking of how what was consumed longer form text versus just now. It just seems
Mhm.
like now we spend our time on feeds, which we don't even have control over what we see on
Don't
them.
even like.
Yeah, which that to me, short of just ignoring it, maybe that's the move. Like it seems like it is. How do you square that circle? Like is social media just a time sink?
I think it's become incompatible. Like I don't think it always was. Like, I mean, God, do you guys remember Fark.com?
Yes.
You know what like it used to talk about a way to kill an afternoon. I remember going to like a bunch of different sites and then somebody, saying, well, instead of loading a bunch of different like, homepages and scrolling through things, you can do it, you can do a feed, you can have something, like try and curate it,
That was the
and
devil. That was the devil in a suit. I swear to God.
it I wonder how much of a turning point it really was, right? Because like you're right. Part of this is you do have to consider that people's the way people consume things has changed. Like we were just talking about, TikTok videos, and I don't know if you guys I saw this tweet. I'm sorry. I know we hate Twitter now.
Oh yeah, but that doesn't mean we fucking stop.
Give us the tweet.
Somebody was like, I'm Gen X and I have an actual attention span, so I don't need a video to break down a story for me. Like just give me the text and I'll be able, like just let me read the text, right? And one, I'm like, I'm not sure anyone's attention span is what it used to be.
Yeah.
But also like it does speak to like this weird filtering that's happened where, somebody will read an article and then make a 7 video series, like a 7 clip series on
Yes.
TikTok, just summarizing the article. And the
It
thing is, people are riveted by that.
it does really feel like it's just we are accepting that reading an article is beyond like it's just not going to happen for some people. But instead, a documentary series needs to happen. That makes me feel not good.
I mean, I think you can't overlook the fact that, I mean, like, Danette, you said like, you don't know if social media was always so incompatible. I mean, you can't overlook the fact that, over the, decade that social media has been around, decade plus. Jeez, I don't know how long. When did Facebook come out? I don't remember. I don't care to look it up. But anyway, in that time, like, they really have distilled the formula where, like, it didn't used to be what it is now, which is to say, like, a slot machine of hell where you never win. I mean, you never win in a real slot machine, but you especially don't ever win on the fucking feed. You're always pulling the fucking lever, and it's just more shit that makes you angry. And, like, even if you, and again, as you say, like, even if you aren't looking at the TikToks, shredding your brain in that way, like, we all lived through the pandemic. No one's fine. Like, we're all fucked. We can't read. But at the same time, it's just like, at least for me, and I hope other people like me, by which I mean you, listener, like, yearn for the days when, like, there was something online that was good. And, like, I'm happy to see the AV Club, like, be that. Like, for example, did you know, listener, that AV Club Undercover is back? Where they have fucking bands cover songs from a big list. You remember that? Okay, that's something I just want to know for me personally. How the hell is this accomplished? Like, the logistics alone astound me. Like, wow.
Yeah, this is something that has been in motion for a while. Like I'm pretty sure reviving it was, one of the original goals in purchasing the
Mm-hmm.
site. Because, obviously Paste started off as more of a music publication. So Josh
Mm-hmm.
Jackson, he's the publisher for all the sites under the Paste Media banner. He just got to work and, we came up with we took a bunch of reader suggestions for the songs, which is what we
Mm-hmm.
always did. But so the logistics are actually trickier because we don't have this home base, right? Like we
Yeah.
don't, we don't have this studio for bands to drop in. So the recording is done in a few different spots now. So the videos will over time start to look a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there are a bunch that have been done in like a space in New York. So like this first batch, similar background or backdrop. And then, if they take place in like LA or something, it's going to look a little different. But yeah, it gets tricky too because, like you put out and, like you send out the kind of invitation and, you're also just fielding interest. And then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you start to see the list shrink down in terms of available songs. But I'm really excited that we have a bunch of recording sessions coming up. Some some newer acts, a few very kind of classic AV Club bands. So yeah, I'm so excited about that. And also, in terms of like, just the spirit, the original spirit of the internet is, like that that whole series was just born from the idea of like, wouldn't it be cool if, and like that, like I just want to see more of that. Like, just that's the spirit that I'm embracing right now is like, wouldn't it be cool if for 2004 week we kicked off this nostalgia, this nostalgia week, this retrospective package with a 4,000 word music article from Sean O'Neill. Like, it's just like,
it was really good. It was I mean, this is what you were talking about like being forward thinking. It's like, yes, like no one's doing what if something, like what if we did this, because it feels like so much like the standard, at least the standard operating procedure, if you don't sort of think any harder about it, is again just like what was on Marvel's latest press release, which is just like there's no what if there's nothing exciting and new. I mean, like literally, like the AV Undercover series, if you don't familiar with this, listeners, it did and still does kick ass, because it, again, you're getting, it's a website that is not simply describing something you already know back to you. Like, this is something new. Like, this fucking band didn't used to have covered this song, and now, like, yeah, just like new shit is so cool. I love it. It's really good. So, Danette, I gotta ask you. It's been too long. Usually people get asked this. Well, actually, I say that. If you look back, the last few guest episodes have done the same thing. So maybe this is the normal way. I was gonna say people usually get asked this before now, but whatever. I'm asking it to you now. Are you, Danette Chavez, an anime sicko?
probably not.
Oh, we love a not. Please, someone say no to our shit.
Yeah. Tell me more. Speak on this.
Um, yeah, I mean, I've definitely watched anime. Actually, my Midwestern accent is flattening that A. My understanding is
Anime.
it should be anime. And I get it. No, I get pronouncing words properly. You double check the pronunciation of my last name.
Yeah, that's because I respect you. I don't respect anime.
Um, yeah, like we watched this show growing up, and it was like on regular TV. I don't even remember like how yeah, it was a show called Transor Z, which I think is more widely known as Mazinger Z. But like
Incredible titles.
it was like just these giant robots doing battle. But the thing that I think this is probably the only thing most people remember is, for some reason, the female battle bot thing, like, like a mecha, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the size of this. She shot her boobs as missiles.
Like, they were gone afterwards.
I mean, they'd eventually come back, I think, to
Oh,
like
they
the home
reload. Yeah.
base. Yeah, and so like I remember, getting to college and describing that to someone, and of course it was a guy who was like, "Oh, that, like there's a whole world of things you can check out now." And
Well, a whole world of like boob missiles or or non-boob based
it
anime.
was kind of like, the whole mecha thing. So we watched stuff like so there's an anime called Escaflowne. And I
Oh yeah.
like,
Oh
you
yeah.
know what I mean? And like, and I mean, this was back when you'd still go and get DVDs, individual DVDs from the video rental place.
Oh hell yeah.
Um, but like I think there's some really beautiful stuff. I've seen some more recent stuff like Delicious and Dungeon. It's just, I think what happens is it's just such a big thing to broach, right?
Oh yeah.
There's
Hmm.
so much there. Like, people feel like, oh man, the MCU, like we're 18,000 movies in. How do I even find my way in? You'd have to multiply that by like 1,000
Yeah.
to get the scope of anime.
And not only just the sheer scope of like the amount of shows and media and what have you, but just like there's so much, especially if you're not sort of inured to it. There's so much that you sort of context and sort of not just like just the sort of feeling of the like how the air feels, just like what is going on here. I guess a good example is just like if we were to watch a new show and one of the characters was an old man that kept trying to grab women's asses and his nose was always bleeding, we'd be like, makes sense, totally normal. And like if a human being were to watch that show, they'd be like, did they put that guy in by accident? Like, what's the point of him? It's like, oh, don't worry about him. He's not important. Like, just don't worry about him. It's just like, but why is he there? It's like, because sometimes that guy's there.
There's
just
always
how it is.
one, okay? There's always at least one.
And it's like, yeah, nah, I feel that. I will push back a bit. I don't want to say push back because I respect people who aren't anime sickos because it means that they have a moral code. But I think you have a sort of an anime sickos mindset about posting. I mean, we've discussed that a bit, which is to say that it sucks ass, but we still do it all the time. I mean, I hate the feed, but I'd be looking at it every day.
So what are your social media feed poisons? Are you Twitter only?
The thing is, like, the reason I'm still on Twitter is because I have not figured out Threads. Like, I don't know what it's for. You know, people tell me like, oh, it's best for like recreating the Facebook experience, and I'm like, which Facebook experience?
Yeah, it doesn't seem good.
Blue Sky was really fun at the start because people were just being really weird.
Yes.
And you know, and there was a very like old internet feel to that. Like, do you remember when you needed an invitation to
Yes.
Spotify?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like all like it had a very old, you know, like classic internet feel or classic, you know, like online posting feel to it. And then that got really big too. And I'm like, maybe I just need to find the right Discord. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know. Like Twitter can feel too big, but then at the same time, like unless you're like paying for the check mark or whatever, you know, or you're already a really big account, no one is seeing anything.
Oh, we've noticed that.
Yeah. That's also one of the reasons why I feel like there's just inherent incompatibility with the feed and any sort of like fun cultural production. It's just because all of these sites have it set up where it's like, is that an outgoing link? Well, I'm sending that to hell.
Yeah. It's like, are you a little demon man? Are you a man from hell? No? Well, then get to the bottom of the feed, idiot. We have to put like some, God. I was going to say someone doing a new type of racism, and I'm just like, J.D. Vance literally did a new type of racism today, where he's like, the damnable Irish are not welcome.
He's doing a full court press on anti-German and anti-Irish sentiment. We'll see how it plays out.
But like, yeah,
a little vintage racism.
Yeah, like Deadwood stuff. Like
it's so wild. It's just like I want someone to ask him, like, Mr. Vance, like, what are the good races? Because like I thought you were gonna say white, but now like it's unclear. Because you have to be racist against Waltz too, because you can't do one without the other. It's really enough topic. What were we talking about? Posting? Blue Sky is not exciting anymore. I'll say that. I'm with you that it was sort of chaotic when it was new, in the sense that anything new is chaotic because it could, all these paths, all these possible paths into different, dimensions are still open to us. We could walk down any road, and now it's very clear what road they're walking down, and it's like this is just bad Twitter with less people on it. I don't care.
There's just never going to be a critical mass there was. And I don't think any app will have super juice the way like Twitter did in 2018 or something. It will be smaller audiences. And actually you shared an article with us the week before we recorded, which is, I think it was like the audience fire hose is not coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I keep coming back to, and I'm saying this as someone outside of media, so obviously I don't know, but like, is this driven largely by like wanting to get the highs of like how things were, like people getting hits on like blog posts the way they were in the 2000s? Like, is trying to achieve that same sort of growth model like the issue here? Is there like what's the word I'm looking for? Reluctance to let go of that?
Absolutely. What's that 30 Rock joke? Like, make it 1997 again.
Through science or magic.
Yeah. It's this again, it's just this misunderstanding of like that kind of surge and like and seeing it as the rule instead of the exception, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember in my like earlier days at AV Club, I would write a newswire that, because, I don't know, it was during Me Too, like that thing, the traffic on that thing would completely eclipse something
Hmm.
that I'd worked on, for hours. And
Yeah.
so it's just, it was a reality you accepted, right? You wrote those things so that you could, publish 6,000 words on Married with Children. I
Yeah.
don't think I wrote 6,000 words, but I wrote a lot. Um, but do you know what I mean? Like it's everyone. I think that most editors are pragmatic enough about that. I mean, there are some writers that will absolutely not, and I get it, right? And this idea of like, well, no, I don't really care to. The way that I describe it now is like one for them, one for me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like,
Hmm.
you write the thing that like, okay, people want to know, and they do want to know this. Like people do want to know who the next big villain is in Marvel's
Mm.
arc or whatever, right? You write
Blungus
that and
explained.
then exactly. You write, like and maybe it doesn't have to be that kind of like
That optimized.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, like if the way my thinking has always been is like, okay, if people are interested in Marvel, like what's something we can say beyond just aggregating what everybody else has done, right? But
Hmm. Hmm.
no, I think especially over the last 10 years, site leads, editors, writers, everybody in media has become more pragmatic about how it works, right? Like no one thinks that, you're going to like keep the lights on by running a bunch of stories about Soviet film canon. We
Right.
ran a few weeks ago, we ran a great feature on that. That, that's the kind of thing that maybe makes somebody like, you guys go, oh, I want to come back to this site, right?
Hmm.
And then you
Hmm.
may, and then maybe you take in a little news, right? But, like both of those types of stories are very important
Hmm.
to the health of a site. I think, but it's just always the stick gets bent the other way, right? Where somebody goes, well, and by somebody I mean like the higher ups, they go, oh well, 500,000 people read Blungus Explained,
Hmm.
and only 15,000 read this really like thoughtful essay somebody wrote about the Alien franchise. Obviously we need to do more of Blungus or whatever, or
Yeah.
we need to start explaining the ending of everything, the ending of
Oh.
Stepmom, this
Oh.
30-year-old movie with well, no, 20-year-old movie with Julia Roberts and Susan Sarandon. I'm going to explain that ending for you. Like it's that's what ends up happening. I don't think that anyone has any illusions about how easy it's going to be
Hmm.
navigating, because the thing we haven't even touched on, and this is probably a topic for your next show, what Google did
Yeah.
to, like the role
Ooh.
that Google played in completely blowing up.
Just reader alone.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's something that can't be ignored, and like, but then the other side of that coin is like, why did so many publications tailor their strategy to a search engine? Like it's like, again, like you're like when you do that, you're already kind of like yielding control of
Yeah.
your own future. Like when you say like, well, we're going to write to the algorithm. We're going to appease the algorithm. And now nothing appeases the algorithm. And so now what?
The Yeah, that's bad. I mean, it feels like sort of the original sin that all of this comes from. This sort of idea that like those news wires or what have you, like those little things that become the lost leader that like gets the huge amounts of hits that brings people in, and some of them might stay. Like from the outsider's perspective, for somebody who has no money in it, it's clear to me that like, well, those are just going to happen sort of randomly, like, and it's impossible to know when, and you just gotta keep trucking and have faith that that'll happen based on the sort of inherent quality of your team. And I think the original sin is the people who see that and it's like, well, let's do that again. Like, we have to do that every single day. And it's like, well, that can't be done. Like, if it could be, then why would any post ever not get 1 million views? I don't know. Am I making sense? Does this ring true?
No, it's the whole go viral strategy.
Yeah.
Just make $1 million, just make $100 million at your first job, and then you never have to work again. Like, it's wishful thinking.
Yeah. We talk a lot about how, like, a lot of these Silicon Valley guys, like, I have a great idea. I will simply make an app that does everything perfectly. And it's like, oh, well, okay. That sounds pretty good if you can do it.
Yeah. I also had that idea, but I don't know how to pull it off. So good luck.
Mm-hmm.
One of my questions about the current media environment, I'm just curious the degree to which the fact that we don't live in the 0% free money interest rate 2010s anymore, and now that has changed things. I think that the free, I was telling Tom that how like the Juicero is like the perfect poster child for that era of just like, we don't know what to do with the money, make a stupid toy that makes juice. But now, as you said, money has value baked into it. It's not free from the bank anymore. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean for like what you want to do and what you want to see on the internet?
I'm pretty pragmatic, right? Like I always have an eye for, what is doing well and how to kind of capitalize on that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so people are really into reading about genre shows on AV Club, and they, historically they have been.
Yeah.
It's not about then hitting every single one, but still, basically trying to like combine what the audience wants with what we're good at, right?
Yeah.
I will say the role of an editor-in-chief is very different from a writer and very different even from a section editor, right? Because one, I have to think more holistically. Mm-hmm. Whereas before it's like TV all the time. Mm-hmm. But, like I have to think about how each section's coverage is, how it works with the others, right? Like, it's a very different way of thinking. And part of that also, involves like thinking about the financial realities, right? Like knowing that like times are very different than they were before. Even something doing really well today doesn't quite mean what it used to mean, when a story did get 1 million page views or something. It's definitely I think I would have to approach things differently anyway, whether or not the whole economic realities had shifted as much as they have. But the goal then is to be the one to deal with that with like my bosses, instead of making that the concern of my staff, right? Like I want them to be thinking about, wouldn't it be cool if, what I mean? Mm-hmm. And also just figuring out what it is that they're passionate about and channeling that energy, like I just, and maybe I'm being naive. I don't think you can go wrong when you write with both passion and purpose, because there are things that I love that I don't think necessarily need to be written about. And there are things that might not immediately interest me, but, people clearly care a lot about this thing. And then, and if they want our take on that, then, we think about like, well, how do we address that? Like there are certain things that you're never going to be able to get to. But yeah, like I think that passion and purpose are equally important. When you skew too much in either direction, I think that's the problem, right? Where you could be writing 10,000 words that no one would read, and it's like, it's not the best feeling.
Yeah, that's my Substack. That's the Anime Sickos newsletter, baby.
And there's nothing wrong with an article that's only meant that really only draws a few hundred or a few thousand people, right? Like that it isn't, and something is not immediately good just because a lot of people have read it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I also I want people to feel proud of everything that they put out there. And so it's like, okay, even if it is quote unquote just news, like let's get this right. Or,
Yeah.
like if you want to slap a fun headline on it, that's always been the, like our approach to things. I think it's harder now to ignore, you know, just how tricky things are, just, like yeah, just how bad things are in
Mm.
digital media. But beyond acknowledging that on a podcast here and there, my goal is really to just keep the people at the AV Club inspired so that they can, continue to like, have guys like you load up that front page, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
baby.
Instead of like waiting for someone else to tell you what to read.
Hell yeah. I love this.
Do you want to say mean things about generative AI? I don't really have any good points about that, but you want to just complain about it?
It sucks.
It just sucks. It
It's
fucking
bad.
blows. Like every time I try to speak about why it sucks, not that I'm like doing lectures, but like I just end up getting so frustrated. I'm like, and another thing, it fucking sucks. I get so upset because it seems so anti-life.
And talking about like if you want the impetus to be wouldn't it be cool if like the AI truly is the looking back machine. It can do nothing else but look back. And like
Yeah.
why it's so gross when the fucking money men are like, make it AI write an article. It's like, why don't you fucking
So have you had meetings or been in conversations with people who are clearly very excited about this in a way that you cannot meet their excitement? Maybe not so much now because I feel like the smoke on it has faded a little.
Yeah. I luckily was not at the site during that failed experiment. And it's certainly not part of our strategy,
Hmm.
like the paced media strategy. What I will say about AI, generative AI, whatever we want to call that, I think the thing that galls me the most about it is why the hell are we trying to replace creativity?
Yes. Yes.
Like I don't, like I get like a calculator being maybe better than an abacus. I don't know. I don't know that for sure. Some like I've heard people extolling the virtues of the abacus.
abacuses look cool. They make a cool sound.
Right? Like I understand computers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I understand how computers have made things better because, like they can do things we can't do. The thing we can do is create. The thing that we're all, most of us are pretty good at is,
Mm-hmm.
writing and, music and art. And, like these are distinctly human things. Why on earth would that be the thing that we would task these computers with instead of, I don't know, finding a cure for cancer?
I I feel like it's too pat of a explanation, but like I haven't come to anything more compelling than like the AI boosters have contempt for creative people, whether that be
I
jealousy or just simply like I like why aren't you doing something more important like me? Why are you wasting like you're or like lazy hippie type thought? Like because nothing else really makes sense.
No, I agree.
Ugh, it's bad. I don't like it.
It also like burns down a forest every time, which
Yeah.
uh,
Well,
I
none of
will
the forests weren't burning, but like, yeah, no, that's still bad.
like they just turned on the image generation on whatever the stupid Twitter AI is, and they didn't put any filters on it. So I've definitely seen Trump doing 9/11. Like it just, I'm surprised because usually when you do the generative AI stuff, you do kind of try to rein it in a little.
Whatever. I don't give a shit about that. Okay. I wanted here's yes. I remembered what I was gonna follow up with, and I'm doing it now. So you made it a point that being an editor in chief is markedly different from being a writer or even an editor of a specific vertical. Did I use that right? Is it vertical?
Yes.
Is that I'm so smart. And so I'm interested in for two reasons. One is just like like I was saying before, like surely evil can't lose. Evil always wins. Like I was so amazed that like, oh my god, like I've seen like Danette's been putting in the work and she moved on up and like it has I don't want to say made it because like again you're still doing the work, but like in terms of like the way we are little cogs and peons from our perspective, you have made it. And it's like that's so fucking cool. And like how did you like get like what was your journey to this vaunted position? Like what are the skills that you had to learn to like become not just an editor who wasn't the chief, but but the chief one?
I read the AV Club so much when I was at the
Mm-hmm.
Reader because there was, it was a weekly paper, so there was always like a down period, right? So I'd
Mm-hmm.
read the AV Club and Television Without Pity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Television Without Pity? And
I do.
like I had watched Rome and I'd still read like a 6,000 word recap of the HBO series Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think for almost everybody who works at the AV Club, the journey begins as, a reader of the site, as a fan of the site. Um, and the when the Sun Times bought the Reader and we had to move over to a different part of River North, I used to go for walks at lunch and I'd find myself up by the old AV Club building, which is still the Onion office, but I'd find myself up there. I'd see the directory for the building, the office directory, and I'd see the name of the AV Club, and I would think to myself, I'm going to work there one day.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
And it took a bit, but like I, I think everybody's journey is a bit different. There's a lot of hard work involved in everyone's journey. The thing I will say, so I started off as a Newswire fellow,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically how they break you in, right? Like, and then from there, they decide like, oh yeah, this person's got something, they can do more than aggregate, they've learned our ways, and I immediately started to like try to stake a place in TV,
Mm-hmm.
and I was lucky to have an editor like Eric Adams who nurtured that, because that's a big part of this is that you can't pull up the ladder behind you. You got to
Yeah.
look back and
Mm-hmm.
see, who you can help up. And I was a TV editor for a while, pushed out, spent some time at a few different places. I was actually the IC of a TV focus site called Prime Timer, which I loved, like talk about, being very like small and independent, but also just how on earth do you keep that up in the middle of Google just suppressing everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so I think in terms of like the broader steps, right? Like writer, editor, like I think that is probably pretty universal. One thing I want to highlight because I think we've talked a bit about news and short form stuff, but like so many people will act like, like that stuff's the devil, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is what's wrong with sites. I mean, frankly, even some of our readers take issue with, like the idea of Newswire.
Yeah.
Um, but I find that that experience was invaluable to my development as a writer and as an editor
Mm-hmm.
because you have to come up with a way to like not only are you writing it quickly, right? Not only are you in some cases taking a crash course on a topic, wringing that information out of your head like a sponge and then immediately moving on to the next thing, right? So like I hadn't seen Fast and the Furious when I was writing about like the fifth sequel, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You absorb a bunch of that information and it teaches you so much about developing angles, about trusting yourself, right? Like the more time that I spent like writing longer things, that was where the doubt started to creep in, when I had more time to like write like, 2,500 word stories, and it would be like, oh, am I doing this right? But when you're doing news and, when you're doing it in the right environment, it teaches you so much about trusting yourself. And, I just want to say that because I think that news gets dumped on
Yeah.
regardless of the outlet, right? You know what I mean? Even at some of the best outlets with some of the best writers, like people act like either, they see news as a stepping stone, like they don't see it as like a place to really be and to really flourish. But,
Yeah.
there are people who have been writing news at AV Club for 10 years, and they do it better than anybody in digital media.
This is sort of a small observation off of that larger explanation, but one thing that even as an outsider, I become furious about is when there is a post on social media that is a news article from whatever publication, be it AV Club or any, and the response, the top comment is like, "Why would you write about this?" And it's like, why don't you fucking read it and find out, idiot? Why would you write, why is this news? And it's like, because of the explanation that's in the article, you idiot. But from a larger perspective, like, that is fascinating, and I think very I'm glad to have heard you say that, because I feel like this is true. Because how do I put this? It's sort of describing, I mean, like, as you said, the pragmatism of, both the passion and purpose. You gotta have both if you are intending to make this be like a business, something that can support not only yourself but like a staff. Because I think about like how, Joe and I do this show. We are not intending to make this a business. Like, we do not have like this supporting us as a goal, because we're intentionally pushing purpose away. This is just pure like what we want to do. The format of the show is so malleable. It is literally just like, what do we want to fucking yap about this week? And if there's nothing, we don't record. And that's really, for us, that's what works, because again, our goal is just to like be having fun and make a product we're happy with.
I said the word too optimized before, but like that is very much something I like. Maybe you've noticed that you like when you're just looking at a piece of content, and in fact I said piece of content, that's disgusting. I should be beat for saying that. But like, you can just tell this thing has been like polished in like the optimization sense, not like polished in goodness, but just like polished in, I don't even want to say SEO, because like Google doesn't even like do that now, but like what would have been SEO. You can just tell like this is so clearly, we are fitting this into an existing whole. What gets communicated is secondary.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand that. That makes me, I can't do it. And more of everything online and in feeds, it feels like that. Like it feels like it has been intentionally curated. It's just, everything's too polished. Everybody's too smart by half.
Mm-hmm.
By comparison, I wanted to say like a 6,000 word long read is not going to be perfect in like the same way, but I want that, because like there's humanity in there. Give me some of that.
I mean, and if the short form stuff is made with an eye towards sort of identity, and Joe, when you say polished, I sort of took that to mean like that the polish that is the anonymizing factor that Danette mentioned earlier, where like trying to scrub an identity and a voice out of a
like
piece
any
of
account
writing.
could say this, because it's just like, did he really do that? Eyes emoji, like that's the goal, right? Because anyone could, that fits to anything, any voice, any speaker.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I don't know. I just want more humanity, and I'm glad there's a friggin' website that's doing it. The AV Club, the only website that has humanity.
Yeah, go read the AV Club, or you're not a guy. You're not like a person. Like you don't count. You're not real if you don't do it. So Danette, I have this question. And you brought this up because you mentioned the AV Club and Onion Office, which is now just the Onion Office. I've been in there a handful of times when I was a younger person, and it really did feel like I was in the Willy Wonka factory. So AV Club and the Onion are no longer together. They're owned by different entities. Like, is that? I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, obviously, I'm glad they're both thriving. It's like, I'm glad mom and dad are both doing well, but like, I wish they were still together. Like do
you guys still talk?
I do not, because, the staff has changed a bit. Like I do, I know Jordan LaFleur. Yes, every time, like, sorry, a tangent. Somebody wrote about dodgeball this week, and every time I say the name LaFleur, I always think about Vince Vaughn's character. But yeah, there's no real collaboration or anything going on. Like it's one of those things where like Tom put it, it's not a breakup. That's not a good way to describe it, but it's more like we're I mean, describing us as foster kids is probably insensitive. Like, we're just happy, that everybody's doing well, that everybody's, finding a way to move on. And yeah, like I could not be happier for them to have, backers now that understand what the Onion is, because we've seen it, right? We've seen how many times people thought they understood what the Onion is, and thought that they could recreate it. We've seen all of the really like pale imitations, and nothing comes close. And that's why you can't dilute it. You've just got to let those weirdos do what they do.
The Babylon Bee stuff is amazing because it's just like, I love when people are like, this is just like the Onion. It's like, okay, so you have brain damage. Like you have literal like, maybe you were magnetized in your sleep or something, but like that is not the statement of a coherent person. Like, yeah, like politics even aside, it's just like the quality here. First of all, they don't do jokes.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing of all right-wing comedy.
It's just like there's a person I don't like.
Like, look at this freak, kill them. I'm like, okay, that's not very funny. I remember when they redid some website bullshit that just deleted all the images, and so all of the Onion stuff that was just a photo with a headline referencing what was in the photo, it's like that's just all gone. And I'm like, again, that just feels like the only kind of person who does that is someone who just like fully does not conceive of the Onion as anything other than a money making entity. That is it's just a line on a fucking spreadsheet, and it's like, this line's the box next to this line is red. Whoa, I'm mad. Bam, bam, bam. And it's like just anti-life creature would do this, and I hate it. But so back when like the Onion and AV Club were like under of the same entity, like was there now? I suppose that I don't have a frame of reference because like I don't know what's different now, because like was there ever cross pollination? Like were the teams working together, or is it just like two separate entities that just happened to be in the same office?
I think the overlap happened when like they would need the Onion or Clickhole would need someone to like appear in a video or to appear in like the image, you know what I mean? So like my old coworker Gwen Einat, who is the culture editor at Block Club Chicago now. I think she had the most frequent appearances. Like she's in if you look this up, she's in the like veteran prostitute, and because they use prostitute in the headline, not sex worker. Veteran prostitute, like instructs new new prostitute in everything that Richard Belzer likes.
I found it. Older prostitute explains to younger prostitute who Richard Belzer is, what he expects.
And so it would be, they'd ask you to pop up for stuff like that. I remember doing some like voice thing. I had to be like some kind of expert, and it was all like voice stuff, right? Like, where they just like had you play over, your voice would play over a segment. Eric is Mr. Autumn Man, our interim EIC, who was, prior to that, TV editor, and prior to that, he worked at one of the local sites, because that's the thing that we haven't even touched on is the AV club used to be made up of like a bunch of local sites. It wasn't
What?
like there was like the AV club, like Austin Bureau. Yeah, it was a
What?
whole it was a whole thing, but like that's how he started. But yeah, Eric is Mr. Autumn Man goes for a walk in a plaid shirt.
Yeah, yeah, holding this little cup.
It was stuff like that. I think no ownership was ever perfect, but I do think like the original owners very much understood that these were two separate things, and it made no sense to try and force them together. You know what I mean? Like synergy was never part of the strategy.
I will say that here's how the synergy did work, even if it wasn't strategic. So, when I was like a little kid, I knew that my older siblings read The Onion and went ha ha, and I thought to myself, I want to go ha ha, but I wasn't allowed to read it, which meant that I would do anything it took to read it. So I would eventually get my hands on like a print edition of The Onion, which again, a week ago I would say how dated does that sentence make me? But they're fucking bringing it back. I would have the print edition of The Onion, and I'd go, oh boy, and I would read the jokes, and I'd go, ha ha, and then I'd get to the back part, and I'm like, this fucking part doesn't have any jokes. What is this piece of shit? This part sucks. And then as I grew older and was like, maybe I'll read the part with no jokes, and I'm like, oh, this is also good. Like, oh, and as I've grown up and like talked to fellow fucking annoying guys like me, I've learned that this is a very, very common journey that one goes on. We're just like, again, there wasn't like it really did feel like The Onion stopped and this other thing with no jokes started. What? Huh? Like, I didn't agree to this when I picked up The Onion, but just like the fact that they were next to each other and both good, you just end up just by osmosis. Like, I guess I'll read this. It's like, oh, I did enjoy that. How about that?
I think the unifying thing was just good writing, right?
Hell yeah.
Like it completely
Yes.
different approaches, but the writing was great.
I love that.
I currently do not follow any writers like specifically. I'm thinking of the Gawker Media days where I like had my little e-commerce job, and I was like, I am very curious to see whatever Ashley Feinberg says about that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I actually followed people regardless of like what they were writing, and if they were writing about something that I didn't care about, the fact they were writing about it made me interested. That doesn't happen now because it's all just fucking dopamine.
Well, you gotta go. What you gotta do, Joe, is you gotta go to fucking. You gotta go
now
to the website.
AV. Now I will start doing that, of course.
Type it in. Look who's fucking saying it. I mean, I guess that's sort of like what a Substack, in theory, is meant to do. But like, again, I don't feel like the Substack model is like. I don't think that's feasible for anything other than like the outlying 1%, which is statistically insignificant and not really worth mentioning.
One quick thing about that I would just want to say about Substack is that like there was the whole controversy too, right? Where a bunch of big accounts were leaving it because they were like platforming assholes, which, would be a whole other thing. But I think it would help to just like say one thing about how it's not that there's nothing inherently wrong with Substack, right? Like even if you only have 50 people subscribing, my thing about that is that's not a cure-all. That's not a real solution for what's going on in digital media. This idea that like, well, if you got laid off from one site, just go start
Right.
another one, because that's part of the problem is that, there were like, it's all the independent sites that are shutting down.
The Substack might help an individual circumstance, but it's going to do nothing for the ecosystem. Like,
Like
Yeah.
I think it's a great forum, and I think that there are some really interesting, I mean, whether it's Substack or a different platform for newsletters, like
Yeah.
I subscribe to several. Like I fully believe in that model, but that's just, it's not a strategy. It's not going to fix what's going on more broadly in digital media.
Yeah, it's not an infrastructural solution.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's still email. Like it, it is taking what could be content elsewhere and moving that to your inbox, which is fine. But if that's the only way to do it, then we see what happens.
Yeah, and if the newsletter takes off and is great, again, what does that actually entail in terms of the broader ecosystem of cultural writing? It means one person got a bag, which again is statistically insignificant and should not be counted. One person is not an industry.
I never thought I would like feel such relief seeing a sidebar of related articles. Like I'm on the AV Club, and it's just like, yeah, I remember when I used to see that all the time. There used to always, you can click on them and shit.
You can do it now, dude. It's not on the Geo Media Kinja shit.
So, I guess my question is, what was the deal with Kinja? I was very interested. As a reader of Gawker, it was interesting. I know you weren't responsible for it. I guess a better question is, as someone on your side, did it suck?
It's so funny because like we recently switched the comments to discuss, and people are like, oh yay, we're doing this again. But then like even within those conversations I see people saying like, well, Kinja wasn't really that bad. And I think it's just with enough distance, you're like, there are worse things. Like
You're like, I was traumatized, but a few years have passed, so I don't
yeah,
really.
Yeah, I'm still alive.
yeah, it's like that part of my life is over. So
It wasn't a good system. At some point, or maybe this was the end state, you could get stuck in what they were called the grays. Your comments didn't count until you were ungrayed. That ruled because half of them were about like, I should definitely not be gray anymore. Which is just so good for a discussion.
That's really when you get to the best of the internet, when the discussion becomes focused on how I am not getting what I am entitled to with regard to praise. Yeah. Shadow banning is just the funniest concept. I love it. Anytime someone gets like legitimately huffy about a shadow ban, it's like, oh my God. Have a real problem. Sicko mode, sicko mode, sicko mode. 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 Folks, I'd like to thank Danette Chavez for going Guesto mode with us today. Danette, that was, I'll say it, great and fascinating stuff. Thank you.
no, thank you guys.
Well, thank you. You're welcome. Well, if people want to know more about you or are curious about the AV Club, what should they do about that?
They can go to avclub.com. Right now, we're wrapping up a week-long retrospective into the year 2004. So that's where you'll find that gorgeous long read on indie music we were talking about earlier, but also our picks for the best movies of the year, and a few different pieces that, like there's a reevaluation of Green Day's American Idiot. There's a piece about how NBC, despite finding success after Friends, how wrapping up such a huge show actually shook their confidence in their strategy. Just a lot of good long reads, and then a very fun post about that being the year that movie tie-in games stopped sucking.
Shit, I need to read that. That sounds good.
Oh, and next week, I don't know if it'll be next week by the time this is out, but we have a package dedicated to BoJack Horseman running next week. It's just a few essays and then a few interviews with the creator and one of the actors.
Nice. That was a pretty good show. I remember that. Awesome. And, you mentioned that there were some other independent sites, worker-owned sites that you were excited about. Can you just rattle them off again so they're fresh in the listeners' minds so that they too can go and be excited about hopefully sustainable culture writing on the internet?
There's Hellgate NYC, Defector, and Aftermath. And then one that Pajiba has been around for a while too. And I really, I like the scrappiness of all of these sites, but also just, they're, especially Hellgate and Defector right now, they're publishing some really great, investigations and essays, and I highly recommend all of them.
Hell yeah. Well, folks listening, you know what you have to do. Support this shit, or else I hate you.
Yeah, real clear. I like that.
Yeah.
That's very good.
It's easy to do and fun, too. You'll enjoy yourself. Anyway, thank you all for listening to Anime Sickos. Thank you again to Danette for being our guest. I forget what I say when it's the end. Well, it is the end. I've been Tom, an anime sicko.
I've been Joe, an anime sicko.
I've been Danette, a not sicko.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Anime Sickos. I've been Tom, a sicko. You can follow me on Twitter at TomHarrison19. Joe is also a sicko. You can follow him on Twitter at ShariaUncle. You can follow Anime Sickos on Twitter at Anime Sickos, or email us at animesickos@gmail.com. Please leave us a review or something. I don't know. Tell a friend. Anyway, until next time, bye.